Hi, welcome to lesson 2 of SoundLab. So in this lesson, I'm gonna talk about an introduction to EQ. So EQ in this context does not mean emotional quotient, it means equalization. So what is equalization? Equalization is the adjustment between the different frequency components of an audio signal. So to kind of understand this, let's play an audio signal. Say this is the kick, right? The kick is an audio signal. But let's say if the if we don't want the kick to sound this way because its frequency signal is not what we've desired, then equalization is basically what we do to change the balance between a kick's frequency components. So to make it kind of sound different. So to do this, open up the mixer, FL Studio, and open up the slot 1 and scroll all the way down until you see this thing called Fruity Parametric EQ2 and open that up. You see something like this. Okay, so basically this is the EQ plugin in FL Studio, and so what you see here is a frequency spectrum, and each of these little numbers represent a band. So band is a control of a certain frequency range. So in this case, band 1 is basically control the frequency area around like 63 Hertz. Band 2 is controlling the frequency area around 136 Hertz and so on and so forth. So to kind of understand what EQ does, let's first play a pattern of kick, say fill each 4 steps. So now you hear a consistent uh, pattern of kick. So yeah, let's open up the EQ again, and here you see a bunch of lights in this frequency spectrum. So um, basically the brighter the light is, the greater energy is in that frequency spectrum. So as you can see, there's a lot of brightness around the area here, which is somewhere like 50 Hertz ish. So that means a lot of energy in this kick's audio signal is concentrated in the 50 Hertz area. So what if we say we don't want that much energy or volume in the frequency area? So what we can do is to drag the band 1 down a bit, and now you can hear very obviously that the frequency volume in that 50 Hertz area has decreased. So yeah, basically this is what EQ does, is it kind of alters the volume of different frequency areas of a given audio signal so that it will kind of create a more balanced sound. EQ is a really essential mixing practice because you virtually need it in every circumstance when you have many instruments together. Uh, and all the instruments are gonna clash with each other because a lot of instruments frequency area overlap. So that's why you need EQ to adjust the frequency area to adjust the frequency range of those instruments so that they don't really clash with each other. Okay, so a little bit more about how to operate on this EQ2 plugin. So you already know how to increase the volume of a certain frequency area simply by dragging up and down of this, and you can see this graphically And yeah, if you want to reset to the default position, you can either click on this band button and click reset, or go here and find a corresponding band and click reset here. Um, yeah. So, and now let's talk about the shape of an EQ curve. So in this case, you only see that band 1 has an EQ curve that looks like this. That's on the left of the band, it looks sort of like a flat line, but on the right, it looks like on the left, it looks like a high straight line, but on the right, it's a lower straight line. This is what we call a low pass or low shelf. So, what a low shelf is it emphasizes the frequency in the left of that frequency band, and it doesn't really emphasize that much frequency on the right of it. So yeah, click reset. And what if we want, but now let's look at 2. 2 has a different band shape from frequency 1, because 2 looks more like a bell curve, right? Whereas 1 is like, it has a higher curve on the left and a lower curve on the right. So 2, if 2 is something called, like, looks like a bell curve, this is what we call it peaking. So peaking is basically emphasizing the frequency component at that specific frequency band. And the last will be this thing called high shelf. High shelf is basically the opposite at low shelf. So at low shelf, you see the higher line on the left and lower line on the right. But on high shelf, you see the higher line on the right and the lower line on the left. And this effect, it sounds like this. Yeah, now you can see the kind of high frequency area is boosted, or you can really just cut out virtually all the high frequency area using band shapes. So now we're going to talk about the bandwidth. So bandwidth is basically here, something, it's in here. So if you navigate through and see this thing called BW, you can adjust it. So yeah, this is like a low bandwidth, meaning the slope you see is kind of steep. High bandwidth will look something like this. So it all depends on how much you want to alter your different frequency area. And the less the bandwidth, the less frequency area is gonna affect. The less frequency range is gonna affect. The more the bandwidth, the more frequency range is gonna affect. So now let's talk about filtering. So filtering is a technique where you cut out certain frequency areas. So there are a lot of types of filtering. There's like the low pass, the high pass, and the band pass, mainly those 3 types. And so in this EQ, we're gonna talk about what each filtering is like. So keep the kick playing, and if you right click on this band 7 thing and we go to type and we select low pass, then this is the kind of low pass filter. And as you can see the shape, it's the low pass basically curves down on the right and is preserves all the curves on the left. So what this does is, as you can kind of already hear, is the low pass filter cuts out all the higher frequency at the band area. So if we move this band from a higher frequency to a lower frequency, you can hear that as the band moves, all the higher frequency, that kind of sound is being removed. So this is the kind of effect of a low pass filter. And the opposite of that, of a low pass, will be a high pass. So let's go to band 1 and select the high pass filter. And as you can kind of hear, the high pass filter is cutting out the lower frequencies and preserving the higher frequencies. So to kind of give what this sounds like is, if you move it to the right, and the more you move to the right, the less frequency on the bass you're gonna hear. So what this does is it completely eliminates the lower frequencies and preserves the higher frequencies. Okay. Okay, now what about bandpass? So bandpass filter is sort of like the middle between low pass and high pass. So a bandpass filter is like a curve down on both sides, meaning that both the lower frequency and the higher frequency are being cut, but only the middle frequency are being preserved. And so you can kind of adjust the bandwidth to set the impact range of your filter. Yeah. And those kind of low pass, band pass, and high passes, they're kind of similar to the low shelf and high shelf we just discussed. But a low shelf, what it does is it's trying to increase the volume of a certain frequency area, whereas a low pass, it's only cutting out and preserving. Yeah. So a low shelf will be either increasing or decreasing the energy in a certain frequency area, but the low pass or high pass will only cut out the frequencies. So yeah, that's and now you might be wondering, why are we talking about all this EQ and stuff, and it seems kind of complicated, like why do we need to manipulate all those waveforms? It's because EQ is a very essential mixing technique that will be used throughout music production. So if you have, right now we only have like a kick sound going, which is kind of, if you just kind of EQ it in and out, it just kind of feels like there's no point. But once you have a lot of different instruments, say like 20 instruments playing at the same time, then EQ becomes very important, because all those instruments will have certain frequency areas that will collapse with one another. So what EQ does is it adjusts the frequency area so that those instruments won't clash with one another, so that each instrument can be heard clearly. So this is the function of EQ. And so next time, to give a more realistic feel of what I'm talking about, we're gonna do application of EQ in our demo project. So yeah, that's it for this time's lesson.